It is obvious that this new way of seeing stands to gain least in an area where there has been the greatest self-indulgence, commercial, conventional portrait photography. On the other hand, to do without people is for photography the most impossible of renunciations. And anyone who did not know it was taught by the best Russian films that milieu and landscape, too, reveal themselves most readily to the photographers who succeed in capturing their anonymous physiognomy, as it were presenting them at face value. Whether this is possible, however, depends very much on the subject. The generation that was not obsessed with going down to posterity in photographs, rather shyly drawing back into their private space in the face of such proceedings, the way Schopenhauer withdrew into the depths of his chair in the Frankfurt picture, taken about 1850, for this very reason allowed that space, the space in which they lived, to get onto the plate with them. That generation did not pass on its virtues, so the Russian feature film was the first opportunity in decades to put before the camera people who had no use for their photographs. And immediately, the human face appeared on film with a new and immeasurable significance. But it was no longer a portrait. What was it? It was the outstanding service of a German photographer to have answered this question. August Sander has compiled a series of faces that is in no way inferior to the tremendous physiognomic gallery mounted by an Eisenstein or a Pudovkin, and he has done it from a scientific viewpoint. His complete work comprises 7 groups which correspond to the existing social order, and is to be published in some 45 folios containing 12 photos each. End quote. So far, we have a sample volume containing 60 reproductions, which offer inexhaustible material for study. Sanders starts off with the peasant. The earthbound man takes the observer through every social stratum and every walk of life up to the highest representatives of civilization, and then goes back down all the way to the idiot. End quote. The photographer did not approach this enormous undertaking as a scholar, or with the advice of ethnographers and sociologists, but as the publisher says, from direct observation. It was assuredly a very impartial, indeed bold sort of observation, but delicate too, very much in the spirit of Goethe's remark. There is a delicate empiricism which so intimately involves itself with the object that it becomes true theory. End quote. So it was quite in order for an observer like Döblin to have hit on precisely the scientific aspects of this work, commenting, just as there is comparative anatomy, which helps us to understand the nature and history of organs, so this photographer is doing comparative photography, adopting a scientific standpoint superior to that of the photographer of detail. End quote. It would be a pity if economic considerations should prevent the continuing publication of this extraordinary body of work. Apart from this basic encouragement, there is a more specific incentive one might offer the publisher. Work like Sanders's could overnight assume unlooked-for topicality. Sudden shifts of power, such as are now overdue in our society, can make the ability to read facial types a matter of vital importance. Whether one is of the left or the right, one will have to get used to being looked at in terms of one's provenance, and one will have to look at others the same way. Sanders's work is more than a picture book; it is a training manual. In our age, there is no work of art that is looked at so closely as a photograph of oneself, one's closest relative and friends, one's sweetheart, wrote Lichtwark back in 1907, thereby moving the inquiry out of the realm of aesthetic distinctions into that of social functions. Only from this vantage point can it be carried further. It is indeed significant that the debate has raged most fiercely around the aesthetics of photography as art, whereas the far less questionable social fact of art as photography was given scarcely a glance. And yet the impact of the photographic reproduction of artworks is of very much greater importance for the function of art than the greater or lesser artistry of a photography that regards all experience as fair game for the camera. The amateur who returns home with great piles of artistic shots is in fact no more appealing a figure than the hunter who comes back with quantities of game that is useless to anyone but the merchant. And the day does indeed seem to be at hand when there will be more illustrated magazines than game merchants. So much for the snapshot, but the emphasis changes completely if we turn from photography as art to art as photography. Everyone will have noticed how much easier it is to get a hold of a painting, more particularly a sculpture and especially architecture in a photograph than in reality. It is all too tempting to blame this squarely on the decline of artistic appreciation, on a failure of contemporary sensibility, but one is brought up short by the way the understanding of great works was transformed at about the same time the techniques of reproduction were being developed. Such works can no longer be regarded as the products of individuals. They have become a collective creation, a corpus so vast it can be assimilated only through miniaturization. In the final analysis, mechanical reproduction is a technique of diminution that helps people to achieve control over works of art, a control without whose aid they could no longer be used.